The Doom the Dark Ages Revelations DLC not only gives us a new fancy spear to twirl around, but it also gives us a whole bunch of new demons to jab in the face of it too. Hell might have frozen over, but that's certainly not going to stop the Doomslayer from doing what he does best. And in this video, we'll be checking out all the new DLC demon types, variants, and bosses that he'll be blasting into meat confetti along the journey. The first new enemy you'll get to meet is a bit of a crazy looking thing called the Buzzsaw. Basically a demon that's been cybernetically augmented and turned into a living war machine covered in mechanical bits and pieces. His left arm replaced by a big spiky lance, flesh and bone replaced by pistons and engines, and those legs have been ripped off and replaced by a giant motorized buzzsaw, hence the name. All of which combined gives us a pretty ruthless enemy type that rides around the place, hacking away at us, while guarding himself with a huge shield, covering the vast majority of his bionic body. Not only is this guy more protected than most of his buddies, but he's also a lot more mobile than them too. Thankfully though, the Buzzsaw shield's got exactly the same flaw as all the other metal shields in the game, in the sense that it can be heated up and obliterated, putting the demon hiding behind it in a very awkward position. Mainly because he's a bit of a puny bugger who's quickly going to get torn apart by pretty much anything you happen to be holding. So once you've lowered the Buzzsaw's defenses, or managed to flank around the back, then it's not going to take too much more firepower to turn this dude into a scrap heap. Which is more than I can say for the next demon type. An alien-headed dude that you might recognise from Doom Eternal and some of the older games, who's back here again in the Revelations DLC to be a massive pain in the arse. The Archvile uses hellfire magic to generate flame projectiles, shooting out from around the demon's body to make it awkward to approach without taking damage. And he can also summon lots and lots of these red holographic-like lesser demons to come flooding into the arena as well, creating a much more hectic situation to be in. These magic translucent variants sort of function like the normal ones, though you're often best avoiding them most of the time to try and save on ammo, because they're just going to keep spawning into the bloody place anyway. The Archvile's demonic magic can be used to generate shield barriers to encircle itself, a form of temporary protection while it waits for all its minions to try and do all of the hard work for it. But the Doomslayer is fully capable of punching through this barrier, with it sort of acting like a normal metal shield. And if you manage to break it, then you'll have a really nice opportunity to do some damage, while the Archvile's just standing around like an oblivious idiot. A very advisable thing to do, because this guy doesn't like staying in one place for very long at all. As just as you're about to blast his fat head off with a shotgun blast, he's probably going to wisp himself away to another location, somewhere else in the arena. One of the main things that will probably piss you off the most with this dude. But if the standard Archvile doesn't wind you up enough, then the armoured variant might do the trick instead. You can expect these guys to fight in a very similar way to the normal ones, but along with being protected by that metal suit, they're going to hit harder and summon much more ruthless hologram demons like the Cosmic Baron for example, and we really don't want loads of those guys charging around the place. So if an armoured Archvile decides to rock up to the scene, then prepare for shit to hit the fan. We've already seen those wild looking Caco demon hybrids flying around in the main game, but the Revelations DLC introduces us to a new floaty demon ball called the Cosmic Elemental. Basically a new Eldritch variant of the classic Pain Elemental that we've seen in some of the past games. Unlike the Caco demon hybrids though, which look completely different to their Hell counterparts, the Cosmic Elemental at least retains some similarities to the Doom Eternal one, aside from having a more mystical Lovecraftian appearance that is. These guys can summon cosmic variants of the Lost Souls too, which can be seen hovering around the big guy taking turns to kamikaze themselves over, just like the normal ones. And that's basically the main way the Cosmic Elemental likes to attack, by bombarding you from the air with those annoying little pests. Because most of the demon strikes are projectile based and come from a distance, this gives you a very nice excuse to get creative with that new meat hook. Though hitting the elemental with explosives can be a good way to deal damage and indirectly take out some of the Lost Soul minions too with splash damage, wiping a whole bunch of them out before they get a chance to yeet themselves over. We've also got to deal with a new sorcerer-styled enemy in the DLC called the Warlock, which is kinda like a non-cosmic variant of the Acolyte, in the sense that it floats around the place waving its arms while casting ethereal spells. The Warlock is definitely more of a passive-aggressive enemy type, as it typically prefers to hang around at the back of the combat zone, conducting its magic tricks to cause disruption and amplify the chaos. You'll probably notice that the arena's been covered in dense purple fog, obscuring your vision and making it a bit trickier to keep tabs on all the other demons running amok. But those demons can also be buffed by the Warlock's magic spells too, hence why they've suddenly got those strange rings wrapping around their bodies, indicating that they're now going to be a tad harder to bring down until the Warlock's enchantment has been lifted, typically by ripping him into pieces. He hasn't just come to the fight to help out his mates though, as just like the Acolyte, this guy's also going to launch projectiles through the air over distance, and quite a bloody lot of them at that. Obviously you don't want to get slapped in the face by a bunch of purple demon balls, so you'll need to keep strafing around from side to side to avoid those incoming spells. Unfortunately though, he also likes to do the same annoying thing that the Acolyte likes to do: teleport to a new location just as you're about to turn him into a pile of bolognese. I guess he's got to protect himself somehow. Along with the totally new demon types we've checked out so far, there's also quite a few new variants of already existing demons in the DLC to help spice things up a bit more. One of those being the Argadon Brute and its very own champion boss, which, to be honest, is a very similar enemy to the Argadon Hunter. But this dude has chosen to bring a giant hammer to the fight rather than a double-bladed sword, which he's going to use to smack the floor to cause big spikes to shoot up from the ground. Hell's most useless demon has now got a variant that can actually be very useful to yourself. The Hallowed Zombie kind of acts more like an ally than an enemy, as its death showers you in a pile of glorious health orbs, which can literally be a lifesaver in some of the DLC's craziest battles. But on the flip side, there's also the purple blighted variants, which you definitely don't want to be getting close to because of their highly volatile explosive nature, and the fact that they'll leave some deadly smoke behind after biting the dust. Those zombies aren't the only demons to get their own blighted variant, because some of the Hell Knights have also been covered in that purple mist too. And these shiny demons are capable of generating much bigger explosions, which can be very tricky to escape from, due to them having such a surprisingly massive blast radius. One more variant to add to the list is the inclusion of a couple more nightmare demons, in the form of the Whiplash and the Revenant. While they tend to use a lot of the same attacks as the normal ones, those of you with a keen eye might have noticed a few slight differences in their abilities. The Nightmare Whiplash leaves a trail of harmful sludge behind in its wake, kinda like a demonic slug, while the Nightmare Revenant can now create scattershots of pink light projectiles, giving you a couple more things to keep in mind when you're taking these guys on. Oh, and before we move on to the bosses, it's probably worth mentioning these floating fireball spitting things, which don't seem to appear in the game's codex, but definitely do appear in a few places during the DLC, either lingering around in set positions or summoned by other demons like the Whiplash leader. The Revelations DLC has 3 main bosses that you'll need to tackle, which we'll be taking a look at next. So obviously the rest of the video might have some spoilers relating to those bosses and the overall plot. The first one we'll be taking on is Marok, the son of Night Sentinel Commander Valen. The leader of the Maker race planned to trap the Doomslayer in Purgatory to make Marok a new champion, who's being manipulated by a mind control device, influencing his actions and basically making him Can Maker's very powerful puppet. She sent him over to fight the Doomslayer while he's hanging about in Purgatory, kicking off a big arena battle that can be split up into 3 distinct phases. Marok's weapon of choice is a pair of golden blades, dual-wielded with different melee combos and slashing strikes, some of which can generate volleys of fast-moving energy waves, which cut through the air towards your location. But aside from conjuring up some golden wolf minions and doing a lot of hacking and slamming, the first phase is a fairly straightforward task to deal with. He's going to add a few new tricks to the pile during the next phase, with the main one trapping you between 2 walls of light, while he lobs a load of different obstacles at you, forcing you to jump, dodge and parry while you're temporarily stuck in that confined space he's created. Some of the attacks he used in the last phase are also going to be a bit deadlier and harder to avoid now too. Things start to get a bit more interesting in the third and final phase, where Can Maker steps into the fight herself to enhance Marok, while summoning a pair of giant laser beams to come shooting down from the sky above, which temporarily roam around the arena acting as potential hazards. He's going to be extra aggressive in this stage, throwing more blade flurries into the mix, while some of his previous attacks get enhanced even further. But he'll eventually end up disrupting Marok's mind control unit, giving him a brief window to destroy the device by stabbing it with a dagger, effectively sacrificing himself in the process. Another boss featured in the DLC is one that you'll actually face twice over the journey. Following on from the events of the main game story, a demonic hell priest called Belias was sort of working as an informant for the High Council, aka the ruling body of hell. We can see this guy overwatching Prince Azrek and the Witch in the main campaign, and in the DLC we'll find him handing over Azrek's spear to the Council, who then grants him ascendance upon his death. Which is kinda fortunate for Belias, as the snidey little bugger gets blasted by the Doomslayer after making his way to the Council chambers, and because he was promised that ascendance upon death, Belias was revived not long after, and transformed into this wacky abomination that you can see on the screen, known as the Henchman. Now, the first fight is a pretty rough one for the Doomslayer, as he gets completely battered by the Henchman and cast down into Purgatory to be imprisoned. It's one of those fights that wasn't designed to be won, otherwise the DLC would have just ended there and then, so it's probably a good job that we lost. But the second time you meet the Henchman will be pretty much right at the end of the DLC's storyline, before you reach the endgame content. And this fight is a lot fairer than the last one because it can be won. Though you'll need to put up with a whole ton of different and very creative attacks, as the massive monster stomps around the place littering the screen with flashy projectiles, while generating lots of dangerous hazards for us to run into as well. He's got a pretty wide variety of attacks, ranging from simple slams to whipping strikes using a retractable metal tentacle that casually sticks out of a random mouth that's popped up on the dude's shoulder. And let's not forget the fact that he'll be constantly summoning purple skulls, and those floaty fireball shooting things that hover around above your head. Whittling down the Henchman's health will eventually lead us to a second phase of the fight, where things are going to get even more hectic still, as that huge jaw on the big guy's stomach is now going to start spewing acid everywhere, giving us even more hazards to avoid, while directly shooting us with streams of it over distance. His constant spam of attacks is sure to test your skills a bit, but one final blast in that ugly mug with the shotgun will be enough to put this guy out of action for good. Try getting back up from that one. Now, there's one more boss in the DLC that can only be reached after collecting all the pieces to make the Astral Boss Key. And after doing a bunch of endgame activities and making your way down to the lower chamber of Purgatory, that Astral Boss will present itself once you walk through those big-ass gates at the back of the room. Lo and behold, we've now got to contend with a colossal variant of the cosmic elemental called Xal'Goroth The Imprisoned. But this guy definitely isn't like the normal variants. Obviously, he is a hell of a lot bigger, but he's also got a crazy number of different attacks under his wing, many of which are designed to completely swamp the arena and force you to use those abilities to avoid being pulverized to crap. Unlike a lot of the past boss battles, this one's much more centered around mobility and equipment knowledge, as you'll constantly need to switch between the spear and shield in order to tackle everything that the boss throws at you, with this being just as much of an obstacle course as it is a general fight. So for instance, Xal'Goroth is often prone to taking away the floor panels, practically forcing you to swing to safety using the spear. But he also likes to generate arena-filling barriers too, that can only be countered by lobbing the shield at them, creating a much more dynamic fight overall, which doesn't just revolve around deflecting melee strikes and diving out of the way of floating skulls. Of course, you'll still need to dive out of the way of some floating skulls, but you'll also need to dive out of the way of an absolute crapload of other stuff much more, all while keeping a close eye on the floor disappearing. Once you've got Xal'Goroth down to about half a health bar, he's going to switch things up by summoning some other demons to the battle, while giving himself a bit of a rest while he floats around in a big bubble, only to return back to the fight when they're all dead, ready to kick off again with even more aggression than before. But once you've finally chipped away the last bit of his health, then the Doomslayer's going to whip out the BFC and give that giant demon ball a good blasting in the gob with a supercharged bolt of energy. And that's going to be the end of that guy. So if you missed my guide on all the different demon types in the base game of Doom the Dark Ages, or you've just got a spare 30 minutes and fancy watching it again, then that video should be up on the screen to click on right now. Though if you want to see every single one of my enemy guides compiled into a single playlist, well, that should also be up on the screen to check out too, if you want to have a little bit of a browse through them.